And a Knoxville man accused of murdering and dismembering his own parents, Joel Guy Jr., showed up in court today. Guy is charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder.
It was supposed to be a family Thanksgiving, a long weekend in Knoxville, Tennessee, the kind filled with food, laughter, and plans for the future. But instead of celebration, police walked into a nightmare. Inside the Guy family home, they found scenes so disturbing that even hardened investigators struggled to put words to it. The victims weren't strangers. They weren't rivals. They were his parents. The son they had raised, supported, and carried through life had turned on them. Not in an argument, not in a sudden fit of rage, but through a plan so cold, so calculated that it was written down step by step. This was no ordinary crime. It was a betrayal of blood, a story of family, money, and murder. And when the truth came out, the world would know him by one chilling name: the Thanksgiving Killer. To understand what happened in Knoxville that Thanksgiving, you have to understand the Guy family and, most importantly, their son, Joel Michael Guy Jr. On the outside, the Guys were a picture of stability. Joel Sr. worked as a pipeline engineer, Lisa as an accounts payable administrator at an oil company. They had been married for over 3 decades, raising their children in a quiet Tennessee suburb. Friends described them as polite, hardworking, and devoted to their daughters. But behind the closed doors of their split-level home, things weren't as simple. Their only son, Joel Jr., was different from the start. Where his sisters grew up, built families, and pursued careers, Joel seemed perpetually stalled. By 28 years old, he was still a college student, drifting between programs at Louisiana State University, never holding down a job, never finishing a degree. Lisa and Joel Sr. paid for everything: his rent, tuition, food, even his health insurance. He lived alone in Baton Rouge, socially isolated, with little contact outside of his parents. To some, he seemed quiet and reserved. To others, there was something unsettling about him: distant, detached, and prone to angry outbursts. Lisa, by all accounts, adored her son. She defended him even when others raised concerns. Friends later told investigators she worried about his lack of direction, but hoped he would find his path eventually. Joel Sr., meanwhile, had a more practical streak. He believed they had done enough to support their son and that it was time for him to stand on his own. That's what made the timing of their retirement announcement so explosive. The Guys had been planning for months to sell their home and move to a smaller house in Sirgoinsville, Tennessee, about 90 miles away. Lisa had already submitted her resignation at work. For the first time, they were preparing to live for themselves, not for their children. But for Joel Jr., the retirement meant more than just a move. It meant financial independence was no longer optional. It was going to be forced. And there was another layer: inheritance. Court documents later revealed that Joel Jr. was fixated on what he stood to gain when his parents passed. Lisa and Joel Sr. had amassed savings, retirement accounts, and life insurance policies valued at hundreds of thousands of dollars. Notes found later in Joel Jr.'s room at LSU would show he had already been thinking about these assets, writing down reminders about his mother's 401k, his father's pension, and the insurance payouts that would come after their deaths. To most children, those numbers are abstract, meant for the distant future. But to Joel Jr., they became a lifeline. His parents' retirement wasn't just an announcement. To him, it was a threat, a reminder that the support he had always relied on was about to end. And that is where the cracks in the family grew into a fault line. Police later described him as entitled. Prosecutors called him manipulative. But perhaps the most chilling part was how calculated he became in response. Because when his parents invited him home for Thanksgiving 2016, Joel Jr. didn't just pack clothes, he packed supplies. He carried a plan. And he had already written out in haunting detail exactly how he intended to turn a family holiday into a crime scene. By late November 2016, Joel Guy Jr. had stopped hesitating. The plan was no longer a dark thought, it had become a methodic, scripted reality. Thanksgiving weekend wasn't just a holiday, it was the stage for execution. He arrived home willingly, seemingly the dutiful son carrying more than just emotional baggage. In his backpack, detectives later found a spiral-bound notebook filled with handwritten instructions. It wasn't a journal, it was a blueprint. One entry reads simply, "Acquire knives, disappear limbs, and acid bin." It wasn't theatrical, it was chillingly direct. On the next page, he detailed exactly where and when. Thanksgiving Saturday morning, parents asleep. Further along, he wrote, "Life insurance, cash all mine." Numbers followed. Dollar amounts referencing his father's 401k, his mother's pension funds, and their home equity. He was calculating not just death, but his future. He also noted methods to obliterate evidence. A line in shaky script, "No garbage disposal too loud. Use toilet." Another read, "Bleach key surfaces. Fade prints." These were not musings, they were step-by-step tactics. He calculated handling the scene, minimizing his exposure to potential discovery, engineering timelines, even the way he labeled his supplies. Gloves, acids, plastic containers. Items that, in context, transformed from benign objects into tools of concealment. The notebook even mapped out an alibi strategy. He noted how to send texts from mother's phone Sunday morning, make it look like she was alive. Every turn of the page confirmed what investigators suspected. This wasn't an impulsive act of violence. It was a meticulously planned betrayal, carried out with the calm precision of someone executing a job, much like a contractor following a blueprint. The effect of this found document was immediate in court. Prosecutors called it a premeditated, cold-blooded conspiracy. It changed the narrative from he snapped to he executed. What's more, Joel Jr. had taken steps to practice the plan, buying chemicals, gloves, plastic bins, a grinder, tools he carefully procured in the weeks before returning home. His spending matched the notebook entries in sequence, corroborating that each purchase was part of a timeline, not random retail. By the time Thanksgiving dinner was finished, Joel Jr. had crossed a threshold. The person his parents had trusted, the person they'd planned to leave their home and savings to, had already committed, in writing, to making himself the sole beneficiary of their lives. Thanksgiving weekend, 2016, what began as a family reunion would soon become a nightmare. After the holiday meal, most of the daughters left around Thursday evening, but Joel Guy Jr. stayed behind. That decision set everything into motion. Late that night, the trust between them would be shattered. He waited for his mother, Lisa, to leave the house. She went out to run errands at Walmart. Meanwhile, upstairs in the fitness room, he ambushed his father. According to investigators, Joel Sr. was stabbed at least 42 times, a brutal and relentless attack. The evidence suggests it began in that exercise room, where furniture was overturned, blood spattered on the walls, and blinds torn signs of a violent struggle. He didn't stop there. When Lisa returned home, she came inside and dropped her groceries at the foyer. That moment became her final one. Joel Jr., piece by calculated piece, carried out the next phase of his plan. She was attacked just inside the house and upstairs, stabbed at least 31 times. Examination later showed that 9 of her ribs had been severed, evidence of an extreme level of violence. The crime scene was intentional and cold. After killing both parents, he dismembered them, cutting off Guy Sr.'s torso and limbs and decapitating Lisa. Their bodies were placed into large plastic bins filled with corrosive chemicals, an acid-based diabolical stew that began erasing their form. Even the final indignity was horrifyingly deliberate. Lisa's head was found in a pot on the stove, still heating, a grotesque, grim symbol of the planned erasure. It gets worse. Joel Jr. sustained serious cuts to his hands during the attack, evidence of how gruesome the struggle had been. Shortly after, he was seen at a nearby Walmart's first aid section, obtaining bandages and antiseptic. But he didn't flee immediately. He stayed in the house, navigating through the destruction. The heat in the house was cranked up, presumably to accelerate decomposition, another detail lifted directly from his notebook's instructions. Then he left. The murder was complete. What remained was chaos: dismembered remains dissolving in vats, severed hands on the floor, walls stained, and a stove still running with a boiling pot on top. But Joel Jr.'s plan left one critical loose end. Lisa was due back at work the following Monday. When she failed to show up for her nursing shift, a woman described by colleagues as dedicated and punctual to the minute, her coworkers immediately knew something was wrong. Concern grew when neither Lisa nor Joel Sr. could be reached by phone. Out of deep worry, they contacted authorities to request a welfare check at the family home in Knoxville. When police arrived and stepped inside, what they discovered was one of the most shocking crime scenes in Tennessee history. When Knox County Sheriff's deputies arrived for the welfare check, the house was eerily quiet from the outside. Nothing suggested what horrors lay within. But the moment they stepped through the front door, they were hit by a wave of heat. The thermostat had been deliberately turned up high. Then came the smell, acrid, chemical, suffocating. They pushed deeper into the house and found blood immediately visible on the walls and floors. The scene told its own story. A violent struggle had erupted days earlier, and whoever had been inside had tried clumsily but deliberately to erase it. The officers moved through the rooms and into the upstairs. That's where they uncovered the most shocking evidence. Plastic bins filled with liquid were in the bathroom and bedrooms, each one holding body parts dissolving in corrosive chemicals. They described it later as a diabolical stew. Nearby, severed hands lay discarded, while other parts of Joel and Lisa had already begun breaking down in the caustic solution. In the kitchen, another gruesome discovery: a pot on the stove, still hot, containing part of Lisa's remains. Investigators said it looked like he had been boiling them, perhaps to destroy tissue faster. The horror of the scene was compounded by Joel Jr.'s obsessive planning. Scattered throughout the house, detectives found his notebooks. Inside were detailed instructions, a breakdown of his parents' financial assets, calculations of how much he would inherit after their deaths. Step-by-step murder instructions, including use knife, not hammer, and chilling reminders like douse bodies with bleach, plans to sever and dispose of limbs in bins, crank up the thermostat, and let time erase evidence. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment act. It was premeditation written down in black ink. Outside the crime scene, investigators worked quickly to locate Joel Jr. He wasn't at the house he had fled after injuring himself during the attack, but his trail wasn't clean. Just days after the murders, he turned up at his apartment in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, treated at a local hospital for deep cuts on his hands. Those injuries matched perfectly with what police expected from the brutal knife attack. On November 29, 2016, Joel Guy Jr. was arrested without incident at his Baton Rouge apartment. Authorities quickly tied him to the crime scene. Through the notebooks, DNA evidence, surveillance footage from Walmart where he had purchased bandages, and the simple fact that he was the last person with his parents. Back in Knoxville, the community was shaken. Joel and Lisa Guy were described as loving, generous, and hardworking people preparing for retirement. They had invited their only son home for Thanksgiving, likely believing it was a chance to reconnect before their next stage of life. Instead, it was their undoing. The investigation had moved fast, but the crime scene they left behind would haunt even seasoned detectives. Sheriff's deputies would later testify it was the most disturbing case they had ever worked. When Joel Guy Jr. was brought back to Tennessee for his trial, the community braced for what was already being called the most gruesome case in living memory. The evidence, photographs, forensic reports, surveillance footage, and his own book of premeditation painted a chilling picture of calculated betrayal and murder. As proceedings began in September 2020, prosecutors laid out unassailable facts. Joel Jr. had meticulously planned the murders of both parents, down to the minute, the tools, and even the cleanup. Every purchase, acid, bleach, gloves, plastic bins, was captured on camera and paired with a notebook entry. But as the prosecution presented their case, an unexpected twist emerged. Joel Guy Jr. asked the court to sentence him to death if convicted. Despite this dramatic move, the prosecutors made clear they would not seek the death penalty. The judge denied the motion, leading to widespread questions. Was this morbid request part of his plan? A last attempt at control, or something else entirely? After 4 harrowing days of testimony, 700 pieces of evidence, and 27 witnesses, the jury deliberated. The verdict was swift and unanimous, guilty on all counts. 2 counts of first-degree premeditated murder, felony murder, and abuse of a corpse. Judge Stephen Sword delivered the sentencing. Lashing out at the brutality and the callousness of the crime, he handed down 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus additional time for the corpse abuse convictions. According to the judge, 300 years isn't enough to account for the horror. Judge Sword also noted Joel's composure in court, describing him as someone with a depraved mind, lacking remorse, and proud of his actions, especially as he threatened to harm his cellmate just to be alone. For the surviving family members, especially his half-sisters, the trial offered closure, but also a chilling reminder of a betrayal that blurred the line between love and calculated violence. They had trusted their brother, someone who had once shared Thanksgiving dinners with them, only to unveil a monster. Even after Joel Guy Jr. was sentenced, the case continued to disturb investigators, journalists, and the public. It wasn't just the brutality of the murders, it was the cold calculation behind them, the way he reduced his parents' lives to assets, debts, and handwritten checklists. During and after the trial, more details from Joel's notes and police reports became public. His so-called book of premeditation revealed not only how he intended to kill, but also how he wanted to erase evidence by dissolving his parents' remains in acid, disposing of body parts in containers, and staging this scene to appear as though no crime had ever occurred. In some entries, he even wrote down reminders to flush chunks down the toilet and to use trash compactor for bones. The level of detail was beyond anything seasoned detectives had seen. It raised haunting questions. Was this about money? Or was there something deeper, a fascination with control, with destruction, with outsmarting others? Joel's own courtroom statements only added to the confusion. At one point, he openly requested to be executed, as if seeking notoriety or martyrdom. At another, he spoke of fantasies about harming fellow inmates, reinforcing prosecutors' arguments that he remained dangerous and unrepentant. His alternating moments of calm and bizarre admissions made it hard to determine if he was attempting to manipulate the system or if his detachment was genuine. Experts pointed to a profile of narcissism and dependency. Joel had lived off his parents well into adulthood, refusing to work, contribute, or build his own life. When faced with losing financial support, he didn't just panic, he plotted their elimination as if it were a business solution. His notes read less like a diary of rage and more like the financial planning of someone who believed he was entitled to everything his parents had worked for. The psychological portrait was clear: entitlement, lack of empathy, and an inability to see his parents as human beings rather than obstacles. For the Guy family, the loss was doubled. Joel Sr. and Lisa brutally murdered, and Joel Jr., their only son, revealed as their killer. Neighbors in the Knoxville community spoke of the shock of realizing that behind the quiet suburban home was a crime scene more horrifying than anything they could imagine. Even law enforcement officers admitted the case stayed with them long after the investigation ended. It left a permanent scar, not only on surviving relatives, but on everyone who learned about the story, a reminder that sometimes the greatest danger doesn't come from outside intruders, but from within a family's own walls. And yet, unanswered questions remain. Did Joel truly believe he could get away with it? Did he ever feel remorse in the days before or after the murders? Or did he see his parents only as a means to an end, a way to secure money and independence without ever leaving the comfort of home? The answers may never be known. What is certain, though, is that this was not simply a case of greed. It was a betrayal so complete, so methodical, that it defied even the imagination of those tasked with uncovering the truth. Today, Joel Michael Guy Jr. sits in prison, serving life without parole. He was given no possibility of release, ensuring he will never walk free again. During sentencing, he showed little emotion, though at one point he stated he wished for the death penalty, a request that seemed less like remorse and more like defiance. For investigators and prosecutors, his case is often described as one of the most chilling examples of premeditated parricide in U.S. history. They still point to his handwritten notes as evidence, not just of planning, but of a mind capable of reducing his parents' lives to nothing more than numbers, debts, and assets. The victims, Joel Sr. and Lisa Guy, are remembered very differently. Friends and family describe them as hardworking, loving parents who wanted to enjoy retirement, travel, and finally live for themselves after raising their son. Their lives ended in violence, but their legacy lives on in the memories of those who knew them. The Joel Guy Jr. murders are more than a story about inheritance. They reveal how entitlement, dependency, and suppressed resentment can transform into something unthinkable. They remind us that the signs of dysfunction, financial manipulation, abusive dynamics, isolation can't be ignored, even within families that look ordinary from the outside. It is also a case about betrayal, a betrayal so profound that even seasoned detectives struggled to describe it. The very people who gave Joel life and supported him into adulthood were the ones he plotted against with the coldness of an accountant. For the audience, the story leaves difficult but important questions. What drives someone to kill the very people who gave them everything? Was this purely about money, or was it also about control and resentment? And perhaps most haunting, were there moments when Joel could have chosen differently before the plan became irreversible? In the end, the Joel Guy Jr. case stands as a warning. Sometimes danger doesn't come from strangers or even from enemies. Sometimes it grows quietly inside a home, hidden under the surface of dependence, secrecy, and entitlement until it's too late. If you found this case compelling, we cover stories like this every week where family secrets, hidden resentments, and chilling crimes come to light. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next case. What do you think Joel's true motive was? Was it only greed or something far more psychological? Share your thoughts in the comments below and stay with us, because the next story is one that will make you rethink how well you really know the people closest to you